Mm.
Hello and welcome to our weekly Integral Love Relationship Web Jam. My name is Martin Utschig and I'm the author of Integral Relationships, a Manual for Men, and my second book, Sex, Purpose, Love, Couples in Integral Relationships, Creating a Better World. And I'm here today with two best-selling authors, Belinda Busteed Burum, and I hope I said that right. And she's the author of the book Finding Love After 40, Real Stories About Real Love in the Prime of Life and a Little Beyond. And Belinda, like me, lives in Los Angeles. And then we're here with Dr. Maria Appelqvist.
Yes, good.
And she's the author of the book that was just released on March 1st, 2 days ago, and made it to the top of the Amazon bestseller list. It's called Conscious Love, Soulful and Intimate Connection, maybe Soulful and Intimate Connections, who joins us from the south of Sweden. Where do you call from, Maria?
Yeah,
exactly?
I'm in Sweden. I'm in the very south of Sweden.
Very south of Sweden. Yeah. Okay. And our topic today is what makes love work. And when I talked with you before the show in the last few days, you also had mentioned that you were somewhat surprised. I think that some women you talked to didn't want to be in a love relationship. So I'm very curious about that. And I'm going to stop the slide presentation so we can all see us better. And we have some people who joined us. So for those of you who joined us, there is a sidebar on the right side of your screen, which is over there. And you can type comments there. It would be great if you would just type a quick hello and where you join us from. And you can also join us live. There is a little hand at the top of the screen where on the right side. And if you click there, a plugin will be downloaded to your browser, and it works best with Google Chrome, but also with other browsers. And then you have to run through a test to test your camera and microphone, and then you can come online. And I hope you will join us during the conversation. And just be aware that this webinar is recorded, and it will be posted on YouTube. So when you join us, you give your consent that you will be publicly seen. And finally, if you're single and have a profile on integralsingles.com, you can share your screen name or your Facebook screen name. What is that called? Facebook, whatever, handle. And then people can connect with you if you're looking for an integral partner. So thank you again, Belinda and Maria, for joining us. And so
it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for arranging this, Martin.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. So, of course, I want to promote everyone who writes books that are positive about co-creating healthy relationships, which you both did. And I read both of your books. And I read Maria's book first, so I start with you. What really fascinated me about your book was that you interviewed couples, and to my surprise, I learned that they were mainly in the U.S. and in where was the one couple was in South America, right?
Yeah, in Costa Rica. They moved out of United States.
And as the title of your book indicates, it's about conscious love. So the focus of their relationships was what we integral people often call, growing up, cleaning up, like doing some psychological work, waking up, growing in consciousness, growing in awareness. And then something that is also part of my book is sharing a purpose in their book that in a way provides a value, makes the world a better place. So that seemed to be sort of like the common theme and probably also your personal interest in writing that book. And Belinda's book is also very fascinating because it's first of all called Finding Love After 40, and we're both slightly over 40, just barely.
Just barely.
Just barely. And the way I described it to her after I read it was like, so like for me, it was like a buffet, right? It showed so many different angles and ways how people found love. And I think it applies to people below 40 as well, because there are so many different approaches, just like, should we look for someone, or does love show up when we're not really looking? And she has really also a wide range of couples, like from George Clooney and big Hollywood stars down to just like very average, if that's the right word, people, and just different ways how they met and the approaches they took to finding love or finding a partner, or not even taking any approach and just opening up. And you sprinkle in a lot of expert advice, like from many people that I read as well, David Data and Lori Gottlieb, and I forgot now all but I mean, like, oh yeah, I read this book. So it's really this, I don't know how to say it. In Sweden, maybe we say smorgasbord.
Smorgasbord. Yeah, the smorgasbord. Yeah. I think that's internationally recognized. You have the whole buffet.
Yeah, the whole buffet. And and it's different from I have more linear approach, right? This is how you self-analyze yourself, and this is how you analyze your partner, and this is the, so like the linear approach, how you get from single to being in a relationship, and you have this, all this big bouquet, where there's a lot of wisdom in there.
Yeah, I'm definitely not linear. So
yeah, you're not linear, right? So this is just like very inspiring, because it was inspiring to me to see, that there's not only one way, but many ways. And so also your books are in a way quite different, because you focus more, Linda, on how to find love, and a little less maybe on then what makes the love work on an ongoing way. And Maria has more of an approach of what the couples really do in order to grow and heal and show up in the world, with a shared purpose.
Although, can I say, I was surprised how long people had stayed married, even though they sort of stumbled into these relationships, they'd finally found the right one.
Yeah.
And, they'd been married for 10, 15 years by the time I talked to them sometimes.
Yeah. And they're very happy. And you write about that, right? How.
Right. And they were, the point I really liked was that they were thrilled to be with each other after all that time.
Yeah.
I think it's key, and maybe Maria talked about that. I don't know, how people, remain happy and optimistic and in love with their partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So what I'm hearing is maybe the couples you talk to haven't thought about relationships, and
right.
And for me, it was more of like, one of the questions I had is, what makes this relationship unique compared from previous ones?
Mm-hmm.
So it was really clear how for the younger couples, for instance, that they had been in a relationship, but somehow there was something that didn't match, or I couldn't commit, or I don't really understand. Like, there was something that, like, everything looked great in a way. Like, they were having great life, no conflicts, great sex, but it was like something was still missing. So so one of the explanation was, it was not like past relationships were not supposed to work. But now finding this partner, it was like, wow, we went deep into a messiness, and actually having conflict from the beginning every day, because they were not yet aware of and conscious how to be with each other, and don't know each other, but they could see the other person's higher self much better than their own higher self. So it was coming from that higher self perspective.
Interesting. My people were really, like Martin said, I called them normal, which maybe is not the best word, but in any case, they were pretty much normal people who were kind of just going through their life. And they too had pretty bad relationships, and they finally found something that worked for them. But what I noticed was that they didn't really argue. Most of them said, they'd had a lot of conflict before or whatever, but in this relationship, they really didn't argue about very much, because they were so in tune. And maybe that's just because they're not at that other level that you're talking about where they're really trying to go deep, but instead just really enjoying being together at this time in life and, you know, having a great time and feeling very compatible and grateful that they'd finally found someone that worked. On the other hand, they had finally acquired the skills like communication and things like that that enabled them to have a happy relationship as well. And they'd learned from their mistakes, in other words. So, I mean, it's interesting you say that.
So it was sort of like a matter of they found, in a way, the right compatible person and already brought a lot of experience and some skills to the relationship. So it was more a matter of finding the right person.
I would say so.
In Maria's couples, it was also finding the right person to heal, grow, and awaken with. So they were more like John Bell would call the soulmate a worthy opponent, right? Somebody who challenges us to become, you know, to realize our fullest potential.
Right. I think yes, exactly. And I think it was more about acceptance, perhaps, with these couples. They finally learned that they couldn't change somebody, that, you know, they just really had found somebody they could accept and they weren't expecting them to change. And they had accepted themselves for who they were, you know, with all their flaws or whatever. They had found somebody, they'd loved themselves. They were comfortable in their own skin and they found somebody who accepted them for who they were and didn't try to change them. So it was sort of that level.
Well, and it seems like there is a lot of things in common, and I think I had also the range from like younger couples meeting each other and not being that conscious or self-reflective, like still having a lot of ego to work with. But it was really about following what you're saying, is that they came from a place of like, I'm in my full power, I love myself. And coming together, that creates a different relationships, because earlier on in our life, or when we are not evolved as human beings, there is this deficiencies when it comes to self-love or not feeling worthy. And if I don't recognize that in myself, I'm ending up in a relationship with someone that is mirroring that. So I felt like the couples I interviewed they had done a lot of their own internal work. They have done a lot of personal growth. And then from that space, they came together and sort of started to co-create relationship based on that level. And one of the couples who were really, like, they were older when they met, and it was really... It was like a conscious choice. She decided it's time for me to actually have a relationship. They came together from when the man came into her life 1 year later. It was quite clear for them both that they had an agreement on the conflict we experienced in previous relationship. We don't want to have that here. So they made an agreement from the beginning that this is not what we want. So it was the consciousness about how they were setting up agreement and contracts together, I would say, as well. Like they being conscious how they are designing and redesigning relationships. So not just like 7 years goes and we've been together for 7 years, but rather having intentions for each year of like, what do I want to grow inside the relationship? What's next for us? Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, I think with my couples who weren't as like consciously designing anything, they were at least really aware of what they did not want, you know, because they had been through this and they'd been through that. So in that sense, they were conscious, you know, like the guy who learned that if you didn't communicate, it's a problem. So he would challenge his partner. I mean, these are people who didn't argue, but if she was upset about something, he'd say, okay, you know, here, let's talk about it. And that was a first for her, you know, and it made a lot of difference in their relationship. You know, she couldn't sort of get away with not sharing that sort of information. So I don't know.
Well, that brings up a bit of a question. Did you find that all or most couples had something what is called, there's a book called The Exceptional 7%, I forgot who the author is. And one thing is that, and the book is basically about the 7% of couples that at the time he wrote the book had long-term happy relationships. So it's interesting that when couples are asked if they're happy, 70% usually say that they're okay or happy in their relationship right now. But the longer people look, right, if you say, is a couple happy in their relationship over 10 years, then the number apparently shrinks to around, less than 10%. And so he analyzed what do these couples that have long-term happy relationships in common. And one of them was what he calls a relationship imperative, so that they sit together, and wrote down what is the shared vision and what are the values, and how will they deal with. One thing that really stuck with me is that they didn't question what each individual partner does in the relationship, but they discussed the when, where, and how, right? So they didn't question the what, right? So if somebody said, I'm going to go on myself on a 2-week retreat, let's say, without you, then they didn't question that desire of one partner to do that, but they discussed the what, when, and how, right? What's the context around that? So did you find that your couple, is just a question, leads to a question, did your couples have, some kind of like vision, mission, value statement for their relationships? And was that part of making it successful?
Yeah, I think so. For me, it was really a big difference between. So I had some couples who work in the realm of conscious sexuality, and they, for natural reasons, they were quite explicit with how they were seeing the relationships. So one couple, for instance, they're saying they're actually valuing the relationship before even their children. Like the relationship comes first. Mm-hmm. So so they also like they schedule one date evening out for themselves every week. Mm-hmm. Another couple, they had, for instance, they were having one night every week. They have what they call sexploration, which is sex beyond ordinary sex. They're having, right? So they actually they consciously design how they can make the relationship thrive in a way. Also other couples were very explicit when it comes to the rituals we're doing together, meditation or writing or ceremonies or rituals or shadow work. Like is more of like some were actually doing it together, and there was one couple that were more like, okay, so now this came up in me, so now I have the tools, and I go and I do the work on myself, and then I come back to the relationship. While they were using each other and seeing each other as the tool for revealing things that needs to heal. But it was the interesting thing is also that the couples I interviewed, they, as a result of coming together, even though they were independently some were having work or having their independent business, there is something that happens in the unionship. So somehow they finding their way how they create the we together, not only we as a couple, as a relationship, but we as how we bring ourselves gifts together out in the world. And that's something they all had created in very different ways. And
I would say it's interesting. I was thinking about that with my couples too. They said things like, it's me and you against the world, which is, I don't know if that's a PC message, but in any case, they felt they put the relationship first, and then they would deal with their families or whatever they were dealing with. But they made conscious effort to keep things interesting, as they said. One couple would sit in the hot tub every morning and talk. That was their time to talk, and they also made time for each other. Maybe they go out to lunch or something like that during the week when they were working. Another couple, they try to do little trips or things like that. So they phrase it in terms of keeping things interesting. But, but they also said, they enjoy doing things together. They don't like to be apart. They just, their relationship is obviously very important to them, and they put it first.
And that's great. You're saying that, because what I found was also that some of the couples were actually saying that, like, that's the argument for why they wanted to do the work together. Because what's the whole point of being in a relationship if you're out and you're doing your own individual things, or you're out in a job, or you're not seeing each other, you're coming back home, you're tired. And how do you create a quality time while being in this business together and working together, or working together from home, even though we may be doing things in separate rooms, but we're spending our time together. And that was something they all seemed to think was really, really important. And I think that's interesting, because a lot of people are saying, well, it's actually good to go to work and not come back and not see your partner, because if you would be around your partner the whole time, you would be tired of your partner. But my couples were rather like, well, that's the whole point. Like, we want to spend time together. We want to be with each other. We want to, have time for each other. And working together, having a business together is something that gives space for that.
Good point. I mean, of course, when you're older, a lot of these couples I talk to, I think have since retired or were retired. So time is a little more, they have more time, or the children are grown, so they don't have, they're not quite as intensely busy. But I think that they did value it. The other thing was, though, one person I'm thinking of really appreciated that his wife understood his need to work a lot. He'd always worked a lot, and he'd had 3 things going at once. He taught, he worked, had a full-time job, etc. And she didn't mind that, whereas other people complained about it. But yet at the same time, he valued the relationship and had pulled back a little bit from some of his activities so they could have the time they needed together. So he felt being in a relationship is kind of a balance. You bend a little bit like a plant, but you want to retain who you are at the same time. You bend, but you don't lose yourself. So there's that element of, you don't want to lose yourself. But I think most of these people weren't so worried about that. They were more concerned about really, that was the other thing, meeting the needs of their partner. Their partner's happiness was paramount to them. It gave them joy, and they did little things and big things to make their partner happy. In fact, one woman I talked to, she was surprised that her husband asked her to marry her after like 7 years together. And I asked her, well, why did he do that? And she said, I don't really know. And she called him over and said, hey, honey, why did you ask me to marry you? And he said, because I thought it would make you happy.
Yeah, how sweet.
Yeah, it's I make the separation about knowing yourself first, and then it's something about knowing the other person, like really knowing the other person better than you know it yourself. And then it's knowing the we, like who we are together. And I could see my couples were holding all the 3 levels in a way. And of course, if you don't know yourself fully from inside out, it's also very difficult to truly get into the skin and learn to know another person. So it was coming from that space of knowing what makes the other person feel thick, what makes them happy, what's their love language, how do I, how do they want to be cheered up if they are down, or like how can I be in this relationship in order to be the best partner.
So when you said the 3 levels, sorry, Belinda, you said they know each other on the 3 levels. What do you mean with that, Maria?
They know each other on the 3 levels. So in the sense of they came, like before the relationship, they knew their self. They had done their own self-growth, right? but being in a relationship, it was about exploration of the other. So actually learn to know you in a way so I know you better than myself almost.
Okay.
Right. And like I'm seeing you, I'm seeing your shit, I'm seeing everything you're hiding or avoiding, but I don't see it in myself, but I see it in you. And then the third level is who we are together, like the we feeling of the relationship and what we are creating together, the values we have, what's important, and so on. So I was seeing they were holding these 3 levels, all of them.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. I think that's so great, because I think we all want someone who, well, at least I do, who knows me better than myself in some way, and not only sees those things, but really understands them in a way that is compassionate. You know, and I think that's where the self-love comes too. If you love yourself and you're at peace with what might be perceived as flaws, but you can also interpret them to be maybe positive in their own way, or you understand where they're coming from, you can give that to another person who can see your things that maybe you're ashamed about and shed a new light on them with a love light, not just going, oh, I wish you'd do this or I wish you'd do that, but you know, they really understand you. I wanted to say one of the couples I met, I was at a theater event, a play, and I was outside with this friend of mine who smokes, and so we were talking to these other 2 people who smoked, and of course, you know, smoking is not on my list of things I like to have around me. But in any case, one of the things that struck me about this couple was that they weren't ashamed. You know, in fact, they both smoked, and they I don't know, they just realized that was one thing they had in common, you know, and they loved it to some degree. So it was like they weren't ashamed, and they valued that. And as far as your we thing, one of the things they also said was that they were the only 2 people on the internet who were honest, you know. So that was a value to them, that they were who they were. They weren't trying to hide anything, you know. They smoked, they drank coffee, they did this, you know. They were who they were, and that's who they were, and they liked each other, you know. So
and I think that's also something, I mean, when you meet someone, you probably try to find the common denominators. I think that's probably a normal human behavior in a way. If you like someone, is you try to find what is it we have in common here? What is it we can cultivate? I mean, consciously or not, I think that is what actually happens. So you notice maybe you notice that your partner like to do photography, and you might have that as an interest, but you never really expanded or explored it. But now it becomes a way that we can go out and do photography together and take pictures. So I think there's ways how we as human beings try to find what is it, the ties that we can bond together and make deeper together.
And maybe knowing which of those ties are essential to us, you know. There was one woman I interviewed who said she wanted a lover, a friend, and a dance partner, and she wouldn't be complete essentially without all 3 of them. And so she went for that. And initially the guy was reluctant to dance, and she was going to leave him actually, but then he decided he would take dancing lessons, and now they love to dance together, you know. But then, so the other end, I think she was into NASCAR, and so, you know, he kind of took that on too, but that wasn't one of her requirements. So, but they both expanded, as you say.
So a little earlier when we talked about this, you know, knowing the other person, or being known by the other person better than we know ourselves. You know, I thought about Sartre, who said hell is other people. And, you know, what he meant by that was, you probably know that saying, right? And what he meant with that is that other people often see our flaws, right? They mirror back to us, you know, we're imperfect. And then, of course, we don't like that. And I often in my workshops, you know, have a little segment where I explain, you know, men often experience women as nagging them, right? And so they want the man to change or to improve for the woman's sake, right? And men typically don't like that. They find it emasculating. But what men like, or what I like, and I think a lot of men like, is if the woman helps the man to become a better man for his own sake. And this is a very important, subtle but important distinction, I think, that we all kind of pick up on, right? When it comes from this, like, I love and accept you the way you are, but here is something I can point out of you to you where you can become a better man or woman for your sake. You know, I'm okay the way you are.
Yeah.
And of course that's a fine line to walk, right? Where
it is, but that's something I really recognized in my couples, and again, like, they were conscious. Some of them had been working in their or are actually leaders in the work in the work of field of conscious sexuality. Since they were aware of the masculine and feminine, they were also aware how like they were holding each other as the king and the queen, or the feminine, like me being in my feminine makes him a king or a better man. So the more feminine I can be and embrace, the more I can be in my feminine power, the more I give permission for him to be in his male power and bringing that out. And the more, of course, if he can be in his masculine energy, he can also hold her and let her surrender more into the feminine. So this polarity play, that was happening the whole time among the couples, consciously or not. So some were actually speaking about it, but they didn't have a theory around it to talk about it, but they were talking about how they had been in relationship before where he had felt emasculated, for instance. So he was very, for him it was really important to feel that he was the masculine pole in this relationship, and she was, of course, giving him permission for that. So they were, all of them, playing out in that realm of understanding masculine, feminine as polarity play, and also how I'm being in my sexual essence is actually bringing out your power in your sexual essence.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. I've been thinking about that lately. I didn't talk about it in the book particularly, although I'm thinking that in general, I think the women were they were strong women, a lot of them, but they were in their feminine within that relationship. I mean, and plus they really respected the man they were with, which is, I think, part of that dynamic as well. If a man doesn't feel respected, I don't think it's going to work. And if a woman doesn't respect the man, it's probably not going to work either, right? But I've been thinking, in looking at people who say, well, they can't find anybody, I think a lot of women push away men with those things. And I know in the past I've been guilty of, complaining a lot, to Martin's point about trying to improve somebody, complaining a lot in my efforts to improve the relationship, if you did this, if you did this, if you did this, and that doesn't really go over all that well. But people have also been inspired when I have seen what their potential is for themselves, like Martin said, But getting back to the other point, I was going to say, I think women today don't necessarily realize the power of the feminine and how to access it, and I think we're understand that better, and the importance of seeing the masculine as well. I mean, I think if anything, that's the clue to finding a relationship, perhaps. Is getting the right balance of that, you think?
Yeah, for me, that's definitely, I mean, I think that's really what can create quality, and that's also how to understand how you can create sustainable relationship over time. Because, I mean, a lot of time couples can be together for like 15, 20, 25 years even. And it, like, on the outside, it looks all good and they feel they are happy. But somehow, if they don't know how to cultivate and nourish that sexual polarity, it becomes a best friend relationship. And so when it becomes a best friend relationship, there is something that is missing, right? Because you don't you can't interact or play with that sexual heat that is important to have. So with time, you don't have sex any longer because your best friend, right? It becomes a natural consequence. So after being out of having sex, it's then very easy to suddenly fall in love in someone outside, because you're now feeling the sexual attraction. So you're feeling seen as a woman, or as a man, you're feeling seen as a man. And then you recognize that, this is from my own experience of coaching couples, men and women, is they recognize when talking to me that, oh wow, now I understand why my marriage failed, because I never felt seen as a man. But in this relationship with this new woman, she makes me feel like a man, and I can embrace my masculine. Or the other way, the woman never felt like she was just a hardworking, what I call a peasant, a hardworking peasant. She couldn't step in and embrace her princess, or being in her priestess, like really being in her power. And I think a lot of time, the way or the door in comes also from women becoming aware of their own power. And I'm seeing that as women, we have like 3 components within ourselves. And this comes from my woo, who labeled that concept of we're having a peasant. We're all women having a peasant. We have a princess and we have a priestess. And the peasant is the hardworking, the one everyday life, who takes care and get married and bring children to life. But she, of course, she's just hardworking, and she's resentful and angry and tired and exhausted. And then we have the princess that just comes into a room and everybody loves her. And then we have the priestess that a lot of women are not even connected with, which is really like knowing your soul's purpose and being connected to who you are and your life mission. And I think a woman isn't happy until she's actually integrated in all these 3. And I'm seeing that happens a lot with women coming to their mid-age. They have to awaken also that priestess within in order to feel complete and whole, and give space for that. And of course, in the same way, there is the equivalent for the man, who also have the 3 components within himself. And I found this as a way for myself, for instance, to see like who is in interplay here. Is it the peasant or the princess? And if you're in a relationship, you can actually, play that game with your partner, to have your partner like, I want you to remind me to be in my princess, and call me out when I'm becoming a too harsh peasant, right? So you, because then you create some nourishment in the play of sexual polarity within the relationship.
It's interesting. What you said really describes my whole experience. There was something missing, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it started with sort of when I was around 38. I was in community theater, and I was attracted to people. Somehow my sexuality woke up in a way that it hadn't been awakened before. And I think it was partly a search for that priestess thing that you're talking about. But I don't know if you can always fix a relationship if it's become more of that friend kind of thing, or maybe that's the dynamic from the beginning.
But, I think sometimes maybe some relationships are not supposed to be sustainable. So I think there's we are different kind of people. So some people, they seem to grow into a relationship, and they grow and they expand themselves the whole life with that relationship. And then there seems to be others who goes from relationship to relationship. So that's their way of growing. And then we have others who prefer, like I'm myself, that I prefer to actually, after my marriage, when I choose to divorce, and I was 27 when I chose to divorce. We had been together for 10 years. We had everything. We had, beautiful house. My husband was perfect. Like everything was perfect. Like it was so perfect. But it was something inside me. I felt depleted. I was walking the dog like for 4 or 5 hours on Saturday and Sundays just to not be home. So there was a part of me that was really unhappy, and I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until one day I saw an ambulance coming, and this sounds really terrible, an ambulance coming and on our street, and I was thinking, I hope that something has happened to my husband. Then I realized I have to leave this marriage. But I mean, I couldn't understand why I wasn't happy. But that was a turning point. Like, I'm wishing he was dead so I could be free. So I took out divorce, and everything happens very quickly. And he was very angry, of course, on me. It still is after all this year. But I made a conscious choice to live a life of being in a family. And of course, I never wanted to recreate that again, because that would have felt like a betrayal to my son to create a new family. Like, it wasn't for me. So I've been exploring different kind of relationships, being in partnerships. But I consciously were choosing a different life than the traditional monogamic life that I couldn't relate to. And so I think there are some people who are actually like me as well in that, but we have the society's norm also that tries to make us into, that's how you're supposed to be. Like, you find a man, a husband, and you get married, and then you're living happily life after. Like, that's the social norm. So if you're outside that, you can feel like there's something wrong with me.
Right. I mean, that's interesting. I've often wondered, sort of, when I got divorced, I thought I'd find Mr. right away, and we'd have the perfect, I'd be back into a monogamous relationship that lasted forever. But maybe it was better for me that it didn't. I've sort of experienced what you have, like lots of different kinds of relationships that have really made me grow. And I'm grateful for that. Although I'm still looking for that, happy ending, so to speak. But,
sorry, I don't mean to, but
that's
the happy ending. Like, that's the romantic idea of love I'm writing about it in my book. That's
right.
The idea of love that society and media have they have imposed that idea on us. So we think that, just watch a movie. There's drama and trauma and tragedy, and then in the final end, they get each other. So now there is a happy ending.
Right.
So we are in some way.
Yeah. No, go ahead, please finish.
Well, so in some way, like, that's our perception of love. The perception of love is there is drama and trauma and happy ending and somehow and I think we have evolved as human beings. I mean, the romantic idea of love is based on a myth in many ways. So seeing through that, I think we can create new, healthier relationships for ourselves, where we can negotiate in a new way and also have conversations about all these things that normal couple don't have. So, for instance, like, how do we want to be with each other? Like, how would we handle if attraction to another person, is that, like, how, because that's part of being a human being, and being in your sexual energy. I mean, I work with sexual energy, so if you're working with your sexual energy, and if you're in your sexual energy, it's like, should I close that off just because I'm in a relationship? No, I can't, right? So how can we have conversation about that? And I think that's how the romantic idea of love, like, now we're together and now we have this agreement together. Now I have closed off myself energetically to the rest of the world. I'm just directing it to you. And I think that it's a denial of our power.
Right. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I've seen people able to do that. On the other hand, a lot of my people actually have found kind of a happy ending. I mean, it's not perfect, it's whatever, but they're very happy to be with one person. Yeah. Maybe they're more the normal people who aren't exploring the frontiers. I mean, one of the couples in my book is in a polyamorous relationship, and they've been in that for quite 20 years or something. But
yeah, and I think that can be also, I think we have to all know what our desires are and how we want it to be, like, and how we, what we really want. And I think that is a more complicated problem in our contemporary society, is that a lot of women and men are disconnected from their own desires. Because we have shut ourselves down so much, so we are not connected to our true desires. And I think there's where we need to start.
So one of the questions I had, and I think you already implicitly answered that, is somebody said, a friend of mine said once to me, I wrote the longest dating profile ever written. It's like, in other words, my book is sort of like, or my books are my vision for the kind of relationships I want to have. And the three of us, we wrote kind of like different books, right? And I think they're all valid in their own right. And so I don't know if you want to say a little bit more how your book reflects your own, your own desire, your own relationship ideal. Or does that resonate with you at all? That one inspiration for writing the book was also to kind of get clear about your desire in the relationship.
It is, and for me, writing my book is, if you read the preface of it, it's of course it's a healing journey, because in some way I'm speaking about something that has been there, and now I'm gathering all this information I'm having, and I know that if I would choose a relationship, it has to be something that just make me to such a better person in a way where I can grow together with, that it has to be on that conscious, soulful level of, and I also know, because I'm working a lot with women entrepreneurs, I also know how important it is to be in a loving relationship to create success with money. I mean, I'm a breakthrough coach in many ways with just sexuality and money, because I know there is where people have most hang up. And I can just speak for myself that when I'm brought in a partner in my life, for a time, my business flourished. I was suddenly, people were coming in, and I didn't even have to do something for it. So I know how important it is to be in that sexual energy, and how to cultivate sexual energies is creating also for your business. And a lot of women entrepreneurs who are single, if you close that down, you're actually closing down also the flourishment in your business. So there is a lot of things of how my couples are using, like they speak about how they are using sexual energy for manifesting as well, right? So it is important to be in that energy for also flourish financially.
And I think, that makes a lot of sense. I also feel like there's something about being fully seen and loved that is kind of grounding, at least for me. And as you say, it helps me do whatever I need to do in the world as well, because I'm not all over the place or whatever. I just feel grounded. There's that experience, someone's your rock. Well, it is sort of nice to have that feeling. You can kind of relax a little bit. And back to Martin's question about I would say that my book is what I wanted in a relationship. I set out to find people who had done it right, really right, and see what they had done. And that's what I want. I want to, I guess part of I almost feel like it's my mission or something to do it right. Whatever right is, I guess. But I wanted to do it right because I felt like I'd had different elements that were good. My marriage was good, but it wasn't somehow totally complete. So I'm sort of on, in the market, or was on a drive to find somebody I could really do it all with. I didn't have any doubts. I was really sure I wanted to be with that person. I felt happy on all levels. I guess that's the integral relationship, right? Where you're really fulfilled on all levels. And I've always seen relationships as a crucible for spiritual growth. I would talk about that. But the interesting thing was, after I finally finished the book, and I wrote it for about 7 years on and off. Suddenly, I didn't care as much about finding someone. I do, but there was some sort of thing that lifted off about that. But, and also I don't know about this. I am interested in spiritual growth, but I feel that's happening anyway. And in some ways, I must confess, I just kind of want to have somebody I can have fun with and travel with and, enjoy my days with. But I don't know, I think that's an evolving question, and maybe, something I need to be really clear about what the purpose is for the next phase of my life.
That's really fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah, I know what I want a relationship that would be someone that brings more of my feminine out of me, like someone where I can lean into that feminine and feel into that, but also surrender into that.
Totally.
In my relationships, I have been many times represented actually the masculine pole in a way. So because I was so much in my masculine energy, so I really decided that it has to come from the other side. I want to I want to be held and feel that I'm held and that I can. And I think that's when you're also, we were talking before about what it means to publish a book, for instance, and it can look like a success, but it's also painful. But just knowing you're having someone who loves you and supporting you and holding your back in a way, and you can feel cared for, that means a lot for how you can continue in your life and also bring forward your, the fullness of your creativity and your life purpose.
Right. And I totally agree with you. That's exactly what I want too, that whole feminine. As a strong woman, you want to find someone who is even stronger and makes you feel feminine, as you say, or allows, or you feel like you want to be in your feminine and surrender, like you said.
Yeah.
So one thing that changed and inspired me to write my second book was being in a seminar with Brian Wetton. He is a coach for the helping profession, and he described how there's like two parts of it. One is to provide our service, right? What we feel passionate about, what we love to do. And then the other part, which he called more the feminine, and then the masculine part of marketing ourselves. And what he described is that a lot of his clients, and everybody in the room went, yeah, that's me and me too, is that often, we're kind of torn between these two poles and do a third thing that's neither providing our service or marketing ourselves, right? So we go on Facebook, or we go to the refrigerator, or we do other things. And I realized, as I say, we cannot be feminine and masculine simultaneously. We can go back and forth between the two. But I noticed that when I do the one thing, then I feel I should do the other thing. And then when I do the other thing, I feel, and when I was in a relationship where I felt this balance, right, then it felt like a rocket can finally take off, because there were both boosters, kind of like, both the feminine and the masculine were simultaneously covered in the relationship. I don't know if or how that resonates with you.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that the kind of grounded energy we're speaking of before? Like when the masculine and feminine is there, it becomes like a pole that is holding the relationship. And I think that's really fascinating. I mean, I've been doing a lot of lecture stops with men where we actually we had that roles that when he was taking the masculine pole and I was holding the feminine pole. and that really, like, just the power it creates of being representing that in the room instead of me being alone and holding it all. Yeah, it's so totally different.
Like when I do a workshop by myself, it's really difficult for me to have attention on somebody who's speaking, right, and who I'm so like interacting with, and at the same time holding energy for the whole room.
Yeah.
But when I co-facilitate, then, and we can play off, right? And when my partner would go into working with one person, I can hold the energy for the whole room and my attention, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And this is all like where I always went around feminine power and things like that, is that yes, you can develop feminine and masculine polarities in males and females, but you cannot breathe in and out or have your attention on one person and the group simultaneously, like full force, right? And that's what makes it for me so juicy to share. And that's when it became clear to me that I want a partner who shares my passion and my purpose, right? That we can create that synergy.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. It's just even on this webinar, you know, right now I see 3 pictures and I like that. And because I feel supported and I feel like I'm supporting, but then when you switch to where it's just me, I suddenly get kind of scared. You know?
Oh, interesting observation.
And like, I'm all alone. I have to do this thing, you know? And so, I mean, even in this kind, it's nice to have relationships, whatever they are, to support us.
That's why I started this webinar, really. You know, I always say I do this for me. And of course, I'm so glad that we get great comments here. I don't know if you see that the comment line on the side of the screen.
I can't.
Do we have any questions, or what are people saying?
People say, great to hear women saying that they want to be able to lean into their feminine. And anyway, we get like really good comments and people enjoy our conversation. I was really looking forward to that. But one reason why I do that is because, you know, I live in Sherman Oaks in some affluent area, and around here there are no people who have that I found. I even started to try to have groups and stuff, and just nobody showed up, right? So this is for me the only way to connect with other people who care about the things that I feel passionate about is through this platform.
Can I share how with my report on what women want?
Yeah,
I have a report on actually what it means to embrace your feminine, and it's
and can you say that word? I don't understand that word. You have a V what?
What women want.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So I have a report. On what women want, and
it's
a actually
report. Okay.
A report. Sorry, my Swedish accent. So it's a report.
Yeah.
And it's about really the components of understanding female sexuality and orgasm. And it's a report you can find on my website, consciouslovetribe.com/gift. There is the report available. So feel free to learn more.
What's the name of your website? Eric is asking how he can get a hand on the report.
Conscious Love Tribe. Maybe I can write it in the chat window.
Yeah. And Belinda, so you can also, if you want, then write your website into the chat window or say it if it's easy.
Yeah, it's my name, which is hard enough.
Yeah.
So I just write it here.
Yeah. So you type it at the bottom of the screen. So we're coming. Wow, this hour went by so fast.
I can't figure out how to do this, actually.
Yeah, if you just click at the bottom of the screen and then type it in, or I can type it in for you.
Where it says redirect.
I don't know. It's a man who loves. So this is so fascinating. I'm seeing what you're saying, Eric. That it's a lot of men really come to me, and I have men who truly supports me, and even more than women. Men seems to have because they understand how important it is that women embrace their feminine. And I have a lot of women who are really resentful to my work. And I even have men who have donated money to me just for supporting me and supporting my cause of educating women about being in their feminine. So it's it's really great to feel that support from men. I love it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, thank you so much. And I feel we need an encore because I didn't get to any of my questions really, which is great.
Oh,
I
really?
was just looking forward to lean back and have you, I'm very, I'm still very guilty, right? But I'm aware of the mansplaining part, right? I posed this question about self-love on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it, because it dawned this morning on me why I have a problem with that, because the German word is selbstverliebt, which has a very negative connotation to it, right? And there's also, so like my idea that and I'm veering off a little bit here, that I felt I became a more loving person by transcending my ego. In other words, becoming less self-absorbed or selfish and focus more outward. And I had several girlfriends and women say, basically, I cannot love you or anyone. I first have to focus on loving myself, right? And so, and then I read The Contradictions of Love, which is by Lena Gunnarsson, another Swedish woman. Also, it's interesting, I'm German, you're American, and you're Swedish. So we didn't even talk about cultural differences, I think, which would be. So I hope you will join us again sometime, because I think this really calls for an encore. And we didn't get to the question more deeply. We touched on it, on, why have so many women given up on love or on relationships or on men, and feel they're just doing better on their own than with men, which really breaks my heart. And it's why I wrote my first book, because I was so shocked when I read the statistics that men do better as far as life expectancy and all these income and less depression and things when they're in a relationship, and women only do better if they're in a good relationship. And statistically, so women statistically do worse when they're in a relationship, and men do better. And I just went like, I need to learn to change that, because I think my ex-wife is now doing much better after our marriage, and I'm I really wanted to figure this out, and that's why I wrote a manual for men, because I thought it helps the men and the women if I write something that helps. It's written in a way that resonates with men, and it's very linear, and here is how it is in a way. And so I'm a mansplainer, right? And so this was really great that you guys could share so much of your female and feminine wisdom, which I could never do.
It was fun. I'm totally up for. We could have a whole series of having conversation about this, because I think the thing is, there's very rare in our society we have these conversations like about what we're talking about, and we could go in so many way deeper. And I think a lot of men and women feel also an internal frustration around it, and are also scared of there's fear about talking about it. So I think the more we can highlight it, make it normal to speak about, we also open the space for it for other people.
It'd be nice to hear what other people are saying too, if they had questions and things. I don't know.
So I want to also be respectful of time.
I don't mean now, but I mean, another time or something.
Somebody said I should ask the participants more question and bring them into the conversation. And Frances joined us. She will be one of the guests in a future webinar from Australia. So I also love that we're so. I think, Eric, you're in Massachusetts, and Francis just got up in Australia. It's 6 o'clock in the morning there.
Nice.
So it's just like, wow, this is so great, and fills my heart, that we can connect that way through technology, which I also think is like part of the future of love. And I know so many couples who even move to other continents to be with their soulmate. We're no longer so limited to a relatively small group of people in our close vicinity to find, this elusive or not so elusive perfect partner. And I was also fascinated, just to say that again, that I thought, oh, this is great. You interviewed all these couples in Sweden, and then you said, no, they live all in America and in Costa Rica.
Well, that's why I'm not dating men. I don't date Swedish men, like, because I don't want to be in Sweden. So, like, I don't even want to have a Swedish man. I don't even think there is a Swedish man available. Like it's not so in my mind frame of reference. No.
Yeah. Oh, I feel so blessed that I'm at my age now part of this wonderful international community where we're preparing a workshop, a 5-day workshop in Turkey, in Istanbul, that 2 women or a group of women want to invite me to. And it's just so amazing, right? The global aspect of this. Anyway, it's clear we could go on. And of course, once I start talking, it's on and on and on. Thank you again, Belinda and Maria, for your books and much success. And I hope all the viewers now and who will watch the YouTube video later will check out your books. I think they add a lot to the conversation and are very apropos to our modern times and postmodern times. Thank you. Much love to both of you.
Thank you.
Namaste. Namaste. Go. Bye-bye.
Bye.